Dashper-Hughes from Sandler Training, and welcome to Friday Live. Little bit of a different Friday Live, everybody, this afternoon with me, because it's just me. Now, for those of you that have been watching over the course of the last 3 months, you'll see that it's been Friday Live with Matthew Dashper-Hughes plus somebody else, because I've been privileged to interview over the course of 3 months 13 really interesting people, which, as I think I commented at the end of last week's episode, is pretty much enough now for a Netflix box set. Hopefully a Netflix box set that would give you a little bit of value. So I thought this week it would make sense to maybe just spend 15-20 minutes just running through some of the key insights that we've learned over the course of the last 3 months, review some of the great people I've spoken with over the course of those 13 weeks, and also tell you where it is that you can potentially catch up on those that you didn't see. And if you like the sound of maybe one or two of the ones that I'm about to talk about and you think, I missed that one, well, I'm going to share with you where it is you can catch a little replay and watch it again. So let's, without further ado, start, I guess, going through all of them. I'm going to try and just talk about them in some sort of logical manner, not necessarily the order in which I talked to them originally, but with some level of logic, because at a high level, the sorts of things that I've been talking about and the sorts of people I've been talking with fall into a number of different categories. It's either psychology and self-management, mental health and well-being, or it's around the customer journey and the voice of the customer, or it's around, I suppose, company growth through marketing and sales. Maybe it's around management and people hiring and productivity. So broadly speaking, all falling under the heading of business and, I suppose, business growth in particular. There was, however, one that kind of stuck out as being a slightly different sort of interview, and I make no apologies for it because it's a very personal thing. There's a fantastic charity based in Staffordshire called Approach Dementia Support, and I spoke with their main fundraising manager, Louise Eagle, and really that was a very, very interesting interview around, I suppose, what it's like to be living with dementia and indeed to be supporting families of those who are living with dementia, particularly during the last 15 months during the COVID pandemic, which has been extraordinarily difficult for everybody, but none more so than for the families of people who are caring for anybody who's vulnerable, and particularly for those who are vulnerable and maybe because of the condition that they've got, struggle to understand what's happening. And so Louise told us some very, very deeply affecting and moving stories, and also gave us some really practical and useful insights in how we can maybe be a little more dementia friendly. And she talks about the move towards trying to make all cities within the UK dementia-friendly cities. And specifically, she was talking about making Stoke-on-Trent a dementia-friendly city because really Approach works within the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire area. But whether you're in Stoke, Staffordshire, or Edinburgh, or Swansea, or Brighton, doesn't really matter, or anywhere else. Ultimately, dementia is one of those conditions that affects many, many, many people. It's not necessarily an effect of aging, and it is something that really there needs to be a great deal more consciousness of and a little bit more awareness of. So very useful interview to go and have a look at. But I suppose speaking to the points around mental health and that kind of thing, that takes me neatly into talking about some of the other amazing people I spoke to. There's a lady called Nicky Bartley who runs a company called Thrive and Shine. Now, Thrive and Shine and Nicky have been working with Keele University, again in the Staffordshire region, to create the world's first, I suppose, academically rigorous way of auditing a company's mental health and their general state of well-being. And this is a device or a system that's actually been created, and it's nicknamed Bessie, which stands for the Bespoke Evaluation and Spotlight on Stress in Employees. I'm sorry I had to look down there, but I had to kind of read it because I can never quite remember what it stands for. But when you say it like that, it makes loads of sense. And since the interview, I've spoken with Nicky a number of times about Bessie and how it's progressing and how it's being rolled out. And I've been pleased to see a number of the dashboards that this actually produces and the insights, the actionable insights that it can give to employers, absolutely staggering. There is nothing else out there that's like this. It can give an employer a really clear view of what's really going on under the bonnet in their own business. Now, it does take a bit of bravery, as an employer to, I suppose, look in the ugly mirror, or what might be the ugly mirror of the real truth of what's actually going on in the organization. You know, you at the top think there's one sort of culture, but that culture doesn't necessarily always filter down all the way through, even when you have a real genuine desire to look after your employees and to manage your duty of care to their well-being as effectively and efficiently as you possibly can do. But I was really struck the other day by one story that Nicky told me about a company who, through using Bessie, and this is a small company, I think they had like something like 14 employees, something like that. So 1-4, that is 14. And they identified, using Bessie, a £70,000 hole in their productivity that was being caused by a combination of absenteeism and a bit of presenteeism, which is, if you're not familiar with that term, it's really where people are not really well enough to work, but they kind of feel that they can't take time off, either because of personal circumstances and they can't afford to take time off, or because culturally the organization doesn't really make it feel like taking time off is acceptable on some level. Okay. And having identified that £70,000 hole, they were able to solve it and to cure it using one very simple method that really didn't cost them a great deal at all. And in fact, it didn't involve mental health training. It didn't involve, you know, any sort of well-being strategies as you might normally recognize them. But having identified why it was, the underlying cause for why it was that the employees were feeling the way they were feeling, a very simple policy change dealt with the issue completely. And do you know what it cost them to do the Bessie survey in the first place? Less than £1,000. A £70,000 return on a £1,000 investment. I mean, I thought that was pretty darn good. So definitely go back and watch that interview. It's super interesting, and Bessie's a really innovative thing. There's nothing else like it on the planet. It's really, really clever. If you've got fewer than 150 employees, I'd urge you to get in touch with Nicky, because at the moment, in the initial tranche of the rollout, she's only doing it with companies up to 150 employees. Companies that are larger than that, you're just going to have to wait, because it will be coming for you as well. Very, very cool. I had a lovely conversation with a lady called Carol Hickson. Now, Carol is the author of this book here. It's called The Resilience Template. So it's 7 steps to improve your mental health. And now Carol's interview is, I have to say, one of my favorites. It's a really, really interesting, insightful look. And I suppose one of the reasons why I really like this interview, and indeed this book, is because Carol, not only is she a good writer, but she's also an extremely effective communicator. When she speaks to you verbally, she does lots of training for companies and things as well. And when she speaks to you verbally, you can tell that Carol's speaking from a place not only of her own clinical expertise and her own therapy qualifications, but also from lived experience. So she does channel her own lived experience through this, and she has had some really challenging things happen to her in her life. Now, she is somebody who is extraordinarily brave, very, very brave in sharing with real openness and vulnerability some of those experiences, so that other people can learn from some of the stuff that she's been through, but also to benefit from the, I suppose, the academic deep dive that she's done into how to deal with some of these things. And a lot of that's shared in the book, but definitely, again, reach out to Carol if you're a business who is looking to have some kind of mental health training or indeed well-being at work strategy that, again, could be beautifully complementary to what we were just talking about with the Bessie program that Nicky has put in place. Whilst we're talking about self-management and I suppose, mental resilience and things, I also had a fantastic interview with a guy called Anthony Taylor. Now, Anthony is a person who's, again, written books. In fact, he's written this book here, Mental Toughness Metaphors. Now, mental toughness is one of those interesting phrases, because lots of people think mental toughness, it's like steroids, and it's there's got this image of this sort of stoic person standing proudly against the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And it's not that at all. It's really a combination of 4 things, as Anthony shared with us, and those 4 things are all C's, so 4 C's. So you've got control, and that's really control over your life, control over your own emotional state. It's a little bit of your commitment to really achievement and to goals. It's a little bit about your confidence. That's the 4th C, and that's confidence not only in your own abilities, but also in your ability to kind of take feedback and all that kind of thing as well. And also then challenge, your ability to actually accept challenge and to accept it with equanimity when you know that failure is a necessary part of trying anything new, because nobody ever really got to true success without failing a few times along the way. In fact, this idea that failure is the opposite of success is in fact one of those incredible misnomers, because it's not. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is a necessary step on the road to success. And I think it's fair to say that all of us have learned a hell of a lot more from failure and from scar tissue than we've ever really learned from winning something and from, doing it well. So it's that ability to bounce back. That's where the resilience piece comes in, that bounce back ability. And also to balance that with objective positivity. And I'm not talking about blind optimism or that kind of let's have this positive mental attitude no matter what happens. No, I'm talking about objective positivity, maintaining a positive bent of mind even when things are bad, because you can learn from them. And I suppose that comes down to this balance of your own sort of personal strength internally and also how you balance that with your outer orientation as well. So if that sort of thing floats your boat and you want to know a little bit more about that, not only should you buy Anthony's amazing books, but also go back and have a little look at that interview that I did with him about 3 months ago, because I believe he was actually my very first interview. So some really interesting things there. I also talked with a number of people around things like productivity. So looking at that, Jamie Squires, who markets himself as the human dynamo, and very, very well he does so as well. He is a productivity expert and works with some phenomenal companies, like people like AstraZeneca, who've been in the news rather a lot for some reason recently. I can't think why. But yeah, he works with great big companies and some amazing organizations to help them with productivity, to avoid procrastination, to be able to focus and enter a state of flow, to not be managed by your email inbox, but also to actually manage your email inbox, to do so in such a way that doesn't have you constantly tapping out little replies every 5 seconds, and to do it in a really, really positive and productive way. So watch the Jamie interview, because he's got some really, I hate the phrase life hacks, but actually it really applies with him. Some of his stuff really is like, oh, wow, that's so simple. I don't know why I didn't think of that before. And he's a really, really interesting guy as well. So well worth watching him. Whilst we were talking about managing businesses and managing productivity, I also had a fantastic interview with a lovely guy called Peter Harris. Now, Peter is the owner of the Alternative Board, TAB, T-A-B, the Alternative Board in Staffordshire. And what does the Alternative Board do? The Alternative Board is a really powerful tool that gives small to medium enterprises, I suppose, something that most of them would never be able to achieve until they get to be much, much bigger companies without something like TAB. And what this is really the benefit of having, I suppose, a number of different and disparate viewpoints around the board table. Now, unless you happen to be a large organization, you can't pay the big, high 5-figure, 6-figure salaries that you need to get a decent sized board table of really smart entrepreneurial people who've got the experience to be able to bring to bear, and also the lenses through which they look that will really benefit you and make you, I suppose, question your own decision making, whether that's strategic or tactical. And do so in a way that actually is constructively challenging what it is you think, generally speaking. Now, Peter's TAB boards are a very powerful tool in that respect, because an SME, small to medium enterprise business owner, can go and attend one of these, and ideally attend several, so that you build up relationships. And what you do is you go and sit around a board table, or on Zoom as it is right now, and you've got all of these other business owners just like you, who give you their viewpoints on the things that you are saying and the questions that you are asking, on the ideas that you've got. And this is one of those things where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, if that sounds a little bit crazy, let me tell you how that works. I've got an idea. You've got an idea. That's 2 ideas. Between the 2 of us, by bouncing things off, we create a 3rd idea. And that 3rd way is often the best way. So 1 + 1 often equals 3 in this particular scenario. And when you've got 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 around a board table, well, the exponential benefits are huge. It's cumulatively extremely powerful for you. So I would urge you to go back and have a little look at the interview that I did with Peter Harris of the Alternative Board, because it's a really interesting thing. Last week, I spoke with my colleague, Roy Johnson. Now, Roy and I suppose we had a bit of a rant, if I'm honest with you, but it feeds very nicely into the other things we were just talking about managing businesses. Because as business managers and business leaders, one of the key things that you've got to do is hire well. You need to be able to take on the right sorts of talents to be able to grow your business. And time and again, we see this happening and happening badly. And looking at some of the data, we discussed the fact that on average, an average employee with an average salary in the UK right now is about £30,000 a year, just shy of. An average employee like that, if you get the hire wrong, it typically takes, 8, 9, 10 months to discover that you got it wrong and maybe to actually exit them, because a lot of people do this thing of extending the probation period. I don't know if you've ever come across that. It's never a good idea, because if you need to extend the probation period, something's gone wrong somewhere in the whole onboarding process, and probably they were a bad hire in the first place. Now, that means that on average, because of the loss of productivity, generally speaking, the loss of achieving targets, etc., the average employee, if it's a bad hire, will cost the business around 4.7 times that employee's annual salary. So a bad hire for an average employee, we're talking about £130,000 plus. For more senior positions or customer-facing, client-facing positions, it's significantly worse than that. So to go back and pick up on a few hints and tips about how to avoid these massive pitfalls, to sort of identify some of the blind spots, and we all know the problem with blind spots is you can't see them. If you want to try and identify some of those blind spots, then go back and watch the interview between myself and Roy Johnson last week. That's, again, a really interesting conversation. And particularly we talked around sales management and sales development, and how it is that, hiring doesn't really finish until you've properly started to onboard somebody and you've really got a sense of how they're going to be going forward, and then managing them to be the best that they can be. And part of managing them to be the best they can be is encouraging a certain amount of self-development as well, and accountability. And that speaks to another interview that I had with my accountability partner, a chap called Sondeep Purewal, or Sonny as I know him. He's based over in Miami, Florida. So there was a bit of a time difference between the two of us, but we still put the interview out at the same time that we normally do with these interviews. That interview is really, really fabulous. Sonny gives us some fantastic insights, not only into the benefits of accountability and holding one another accountable and holding each other's feet to the fire occasionally when we need to, with a few consequences built in there, but also the benefit of having a peer-to-peer relationship where, you have two people who are worthy rivals, but also have mutual respect, and they're able to compete with each other in a very healthy way. So it's constructive challenge, and what that can do to drive you to new heights and to find that extra 10% of gas that is in the tank somewhere. So that's a really good interview. And also Sonny, because he's a very insightful sales trainer and salesperson, he was able to talk a lot about reducing your sales cycle so that it's a much shorter sales cycle, qualifying people much more effectively, avoiding too much discounting. And that's a really interesting chat. I mean, as my conversations weekly with him always are. Maybe I should film more of them, because that's always interesting as well. So talking about growth and sales, it would be mad not to talk a little bit about marketing and customers. So talking about customers first and foremost, I talked to a lady called Veronica Kitten. Now, Veronica runs a business called VK Business Assist. Now, VK Business Assist do a number of different things, but what Veronica particularly does, and what we were talking about, was she helps you to map your customer journey. So all the way from those early, pre-contact points where there's some initial awareness around the fact there might be an issue that needs to be addressed, through awareness for solutions, through awareness of your organization, through to them considering your organization as a potential solution for their problems, through to engagement, whatever that engagement looks like, whether it's online, whether it's on social media, whether it's through one of your sales team if you've got actual flesh and blood salespeople, and then whatever the sales process looks like, how that feels from the customer's point of view, what that journey really looks like. Is that process as efficient and effective as it could be? Onboarding, what does that look like? How does that feel to the customer? Then when the customer is actually onboarded and they're part of your overall, I suppose, their overall portfolio of customers, you're part of your customer base. How do they feel? How are they treated? How do you, I suppose, what kind of touch points have you got with them going forward? How do you expand that customer? How do you retain that customer? What kind of programs have you got in place? So mapping that full customer journey is extraordinarily important. And I'd urge you to go back and have a good look at the interview that I did with Veronica, and maybe even consider doing one of her half-day workshops where she can help you to map out your customer journey. In surprisingly short time, she can help you to map it out. On that same point, I also talked to my good friend Aaron Chetwin. Now, Aaron is the owner of Insight 6 on Merseyside, which means that he's based in Liverpool and its surrounding areas. Now, Aaron and Insight 6 as an organization really deal with CX. CX is a shortened way of saying customer experience. And whatever you think of the title CX, customer experience is certainly something that you need to have at the forefront of what you do. And one of the overarching themes of everything that's come through with the people that I've been speaking to is you've got to think as the customer. You need to think how they think and see through their eyes to the greatest extent that you can do, and stop force feeding features and benefits upon them, but actually think as they think. And Aaron talked a little bit about getting feedback from customers and actually acting on that feedback. And one of the things that I thought was a really valuable insight from Aaron was simply this: if you take customer feedback simply to tick a box, then actually that's worse than not taking customer feedback at all. Because what you're really saying to your customers is, we don't actually care what you think. We're going to take the feedback and we're just going to tick the box because that's what we said we were going to do. And we're going to do nothing with it. We're going to give you no feedback on your feedback. And as a result, what you're really doing is you're sticking two fingers up to your customers and saying, yeah, we don't really care. We're paying lip service. You know, those text message surveys that you get after certain interactions with certain large companies, where they say, tell us how we did today. And you go back and say it was crap, 1 out of 5. And they come back and say, great, terrific. And immediately it feels disingenuous at best. It's misleading. And frankly, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. These people are not really listening to you. So Aaron's insightful conversation is really valuable, and urge you to go back and have a look at his interview as well. That then speaks to two other kind of areas that we spoke to, which is really around marketing. And very specifically, I had a conversation with Jack Green from Jack Green Media around the tools of doing video and doing it well, because we're all talking on video. I'm talking on video right now. So we're all good at talking on video these days, or are we? Jack talks a little bit about the good ways to do this thing and how to really kind of do video well without necessarily breaking the bank, without having to invest in loads and loads of different equipment, without having necessarily to invest very much at all, because we've all got our mobile phones in this day and age, and how you can use that quite effectively. Also, what good even looks like when it comes to video content. How do you manage your video content in this day and age where everybody's becoming almost kind of a little bit blind to it, because we're all using video these days? So what does it look like to do it well and to do it differently to everybody else? I then also had a fantastic conversation with my only interview out of the first 13, where there were more interviewees than there was an interviewer, because I had both Chelsea Spencer and Catherine Aberley from So Marketing, an award-winning digital marketing agency based in Staffordshire Moorlands, in the heart of Leek, also with an office in London, you know, but down in London. I don't know if it's a town you've ever heard of. So yeah, incredible organization, and they are really, really groundbreaking in the stuff that they do. That is a fascinating conversation. And both Chelsea and Catherine shared with me their views on what it's like to really think with the voice of the customer, to think through the customer's eyes, and to be able to create great content, but also the right medium, because sometimes the medium is the message. And when it comes to digital marketing, you know, are you even on the right social channels? Are you using the right kind of website? You know, what kind of language are you using? Are you talking to your customer in the right tone of voice? Really powerful stuff. And that was really the full gamut of the 13 in the first 3 months. So I'm intrigued to hear from all of you. What did you think of those 13 interviews? I thoroughly got loads of value out of it, and we got some great feedback on the day for each one that we were actually speaking to at the time. Some great comments from all of you. But I'd love you to share with me your thoughts. Who would you like me to be interviewing again? Do you get value out of these things? Would it be useful for me to be talking to any of those same people again about something different? Would you like me to be interviewing any more people around marketing, particularly around sales? Do you want me to do anything specifically around hiring and people, management, productivity, psychology, self-management, any of those sorts of areas? Please do either put something in the comments or send me a direct message. You can contact me in a number of different ways. You can reach me on Twitter at Sandler_MDH. You can reach me via my email, which is mdh@sandler.com. You can reach me on my mobile phone, which is 07715269724, or you can simply find me on LinkedIn, connect to me and send me a message. There are not too many people called Matthew Dashper-Hughes. In fact, I'm pretty sure I am, in fact, the only one that's on there. So that is it for this as I suppose, an overview of the last 3 months worth of LinkedIn Live. I trust that it's been of some kind of value to you. I've really enjoyed putting this content out for everybody's benefit. And yeah, let me know what you think. I will speak to you all in the next series of LinkedIn Live. Now, before I go, there was one thing that I did promise, wasn't there? Which is I was going to tell you how to go and watch these things on replay. If you go to YouTube and find Sandler Training by Roy Johnson and M. Dashper-Hughes, just type in Sandler Training by Roy and it'll just come up because you'll find it. Like and subscribe to that channel. In there, you'll find a playlist, which is all 13 of the interviews that I've just talked about. And I'm going to put this little summary video in there as well. So there'll be 14 videos in there, and each one of them is about half an hour long. Hope you enjoy it. Hope it gives you some real value. And if there was one in particular that you really enjoyed, please do let me know which one it was. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope that's been of value to you, and I will see you all again very soon.